Okay, so we're going to start taking apart again. I've done this once and I did a real deficient job at it. Afterwards, there were a lot of things, a lot of new information that I felt like I saw about the Lord's Supper and how it was literally what the Israelites did in Egypt at the beginning of the 14th evening um, before they walked out on the 15th. So we're going to begin taking that apart step by step. However, we have to go understand the construction and the structure from Genesis of what we're given. So what we're looking at is the time we're going to be looking at is the timeline of the Lord's Supper. And this is just the introduction of it. We're probably barely going to scratch the surface. And God willing, my plan is that we come back every weekend until we get all the way through this. And I hope next week we'll push through a big part of it. But this also is a big part of it as a prelude to what we're going to be looking at. Because we have to firmly establish by the patterns and by the word what it was God was saying when he gave us evening and morning in that pattern as the measure of a day. There was a specific reason he did that. So that's what we're going to be looking at. The majority of it tonight is what we're going to be looking at, is that pattern that he gave us. Erev is when a day begins. Okay, what is happening is a lot of people don't understand that the order, okay, the word is Sadur, the order of what Elohim has given is literally set in Genesis. They look for I had one gentleman who actually is a doctor, told me, I counted it. I counted the numbers. I counted how many times day is said and how many times Erev is said. And day is said, I don't know how many thousands of times. He said more than the word Erev. Therefore, the word day is much more important than the word Erev and or evening. And that's why our Sabbath begins at daytime, begins at daylight. So people want order and they want to understand the scriptures, but they don't see the order of Genesis. They don't see what was established. And I hope by the time we get through this evening, you're going to see a solid link of what he's doing in Genesis all the way into the New Testament with Yeshua. So don't let anybody sway you away from the pattern that is given in Genesis. Apologize for the typo. Genesis. You'll miss the patterns of Yeshua. Literally, it's going to be a pattern of Yeshua. Genesis 1:5 said, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, Yom and Lila. And then he says, evening or Erev and morning, Boker, were the first Yom, or the first day. So what does the Bible tell us Erev looks like? So what does the Bible tell us, and what does Erev look like? Right over here is the Etymological Dictionary of Biblical Hebrew, and you have a Ein, Resh, Vav, and it's Erev. And the root, the three consonants, means mixed substances with no change in character, penetrate with a foreign matter. That's exactly what the word Erev means. And Erev is a rich root with many wonderful words built from it. I mean, I could study the etymology of Erev probably for 6 months and keep digging out new things. But our target right here is Genesis 1:5. You see the GN 1:5, and it's evening, mixed shades of light. And it says V'haya Erev, V'haya Boker. And there was evening and there was morning. And it is mixed shades of light. So the evening is the mixed shades of light. That is the etymological clue that we're given. We were given a second clue that Erev has shadows. At least part of Erev has shadows. If we look at this, let's read it verbatim. Prepare ye war against her. Rise and let us go up at noon. Woe unto us, for the day goeth away, for the shadows, the shadows of evening are stretched out. So they were going to go up at noon, but currently they were saying, woe unto us, for the shade or the shadow of evening are stretched out. And this word stretched out, the first place we see it is in Exodus 7:5. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand upon Egypt. So this is, you get the picture of an arm held out from the shoulder, and it's long and it's a length away from your body, and bring out the children of Israel from among them. This is a picture of mixed shades of light and stretched out shadows. This is Erev. This is part of Erev. This is not all of Erev. Erev will have stretched out shadows for at least part of it. But this is how we can know that we understand Erev. You see that the sky is no longer blue like in the day, not near the horizon. And we see that the sun is low enough that it's stretching those shadows out so that the tree looks probably 4 or 5 times taller than it really is. So why does a day begin with Erev? What's the symbolism? From someone who watches the moon for the last several years, Erev is a time when the sun and the moon frequently share the sky together for at least part of the time during an Erev. I'm going to say that again. That's a mouthful. Erev is a time when the sun and the moon frequently share the sky together for at least part of the time, and then I say the time which is Erev. We have times when I see the new moon that the sun will not have set and the moon will appear in the sky. My charts will say the moon is going to set at such and such an hour, but you'll be able to see the sun, and it's usually 5 to 10 minutes, maximum 10 minutes before sunset, usually more like 5 minutes. But during Erev, the sky is still lit. And I'm going to make a statement and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. When Adam was created, it was as a boker. Our word boker means like the breaking forth of light, that time when the light comes up from the surface of the earth before you see the sun, until those long shadows that are created as the sun goes up disappears. When Adam fell, it was as an Erev. The space in between Boker and Erev represents a man's lifespan. Boker to Erev represents the days of a man. This is the prayer of Moses, and this is, I just love this. It's beautiful. It's one of my favorite things because you see a lot of the calendar language in here. A prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Thou turnest man to destruction and saith, return, you children of man, for 1,000 days in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Thou carriest them away with a flood. They are as asleep. And that is added actually in Hebrew. It says they sleep. In the morning, in the boker, they are like grass which groweth up. In the morning, in the boker, this grass flourishes and groweth up. And in the evening, in the Erev, it is cut down and withereth. So the life of a man is represented from Boker to Erev. For we are consumed by thy anger, and by thy wrath we are troubled. Thou hast set our iniquities before us, our secret sins in the light of thy countenance. For all of our days are passed away in wrath. We spend our year as a tale that was told. The days of our years are 80 years and 10. And if by reason of strength they be fourscore, yet is their strength labor and sorrow. For it is soon cut off and we fly away. Who knoweth the power of thine anger? Even according to thy fear, so is thy wrath. So teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. And I want to begin to open this pattern to you. The reason that a lot of people get confused and they begin to look at the Sabbath as beginning in a day is because we're not awake at night. And so the Bible talks a lot about the day and less about the night. We number our existence by the days. We're awake by the years. We don't number them by the nights that we're asleep. Psalms 90:13. Return, O Lord, how long, and let it repent thee concerning thy servants. O satisfy us early with thy mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all of our days. Make us glad according to the days wherein thou hast afflicted us, and the years wherein we have seen evil. Let thy work appear unto thy servants, and glory unto thy children. Let the beauty of the Lord be established upon us, and establish ye the work of our hands. And establish thou the work of our hands upon us, yea, the work of our hands, establish thou it. That was the end of that one. Now let's go to Psalms 110. The Psalm of David. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make mine enemies thine footstool. And the Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power, in the beauty of the holiness from the womb of the morning. The morning is seen spiritually as the birth of when we are born from our mothers, and the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. Thou hast the dew of thy youth. God hath shown and will not repent. Thou art our priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord at thy right hand shall strike through the kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the heathen. He shall fill the places with dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries. He shall drink the blood. I shall drink the brook in the way. Therefore he shall lift up the head. I posted another verse parallel to this in the Facebook group. And in both of these verses, this one is about Yeshua specifically. It says, in the beauty of holiness in the womb of his morning, thou hast the dew of youth. Two more verses I've added to the group that show that Yeshua, when he was on the earth, was not as an older, more mature Omer that was coming to the end of its life cycle. He had the dew of his youth, and the other verse was says, I believe, tender grass. So take a look at those when you get a chance. These are phrases we all know and we use. Twilight years. Twilight years are the final years of a person's life, especially those spent in retirement. We have heard the term, I have a lot, sunset of life. That's death, or as someone said, the final trip to the cemetery. As the sun comes down, there are shadows, the long shadows. At sunset, there are no more shadows. Post sunset, this is a different location, but you can still see the sky is blue. It is still light in the sky. This is really important to understand because a lot of the people who take the verses that say we're children of light and run with it to understand that we have a Sabbath that begins in the daytime don't watch the sky, don't really understand the condition of the greater sky above the horizon. Again, many times low to the horizon, you've got that beautiful jasper color that we see in Revelation. But if you're looking above that, you still have that beautiful blue sky, and it is still light enough that you can see your surroundings. So why does a day begin with Erev? As we talked about, Erev is a time when the sun and the moon frequently share the sky together. It's during the Erev that the sky is still lit. The upper sky is still blue, the lower skies are mixed. When Adam was created, it was as a boker. When Adam fell, it was as an Erev. Adam was created to live eternally. But when he fell, it says in the day he sinned, he died. It was as an Erev. The space in the middle represents a man's lifespan. Starting the day at Erev is a reminder of the fall of Adam, but there's more. The daylight hours represent the span of a man's life. We're going to look at what Yeshua had to say about this. And now that we know that the daylight hours represents the span of a man's life, and he came as the sinless Son of Man. Let's read this. John 9:1. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin? That's Genesis, the fall. This man or his parents, that he was born blind. And Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him, the works of God. We're going to see the works of God here. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. Yeshua was specifically speaking of the time when he would lay down his life. He was speaking of his lifespan as a man. And then he says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And we're going to see this come into play. I hope you're going to see it with me. And when he had spoke thus, he spat on the ground. This is the works of God being made manifest. This was a creation moment. He spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. And he said unto him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam or Silwan, which is by interpretation sent. And he went his way, therefore, and washed and came seeing. So Yeshua is using all the phrases that we've just been looking at. He's saying, while it is day, while I'm here, while I'm alive on this earth, I have to do the works of him who sent me, because the night, my death is coming, and I won't do these works anymore. I won't be here. No man can work. And then he goes on, he says, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Mixed shades of light we're familiar with because we looked at it when we looked at Ezekiel's wheel. Mixed shades of light not only reminds us of Adam's fall, but it's also reminding us of the presence of God. Erev is a place that reminds us of Yah. Remember Genesis 4:3, and he who sat was to look upon like jasper and sardine stone, and there was a rainbow round about the throne, in the sight like unto an emerald. Before man was made, Boker, Yah was there. Before man fell, Erev, Yah was there. Yah was present in the first day of creation when he gave light from himself, and we know him as Yeshua. And Yah was in the seventh day of creation when he rested from his deputyship. Now I'm going to use a term that I hope is not offensive because I know I learned it in church, and that is Yah is omnipresent, but he is everywhere. He sees what happened. He sees what's going to happen. He sees what we hide from other people. He sees what we think. He sees what we feel. He is everywhere. Proverbs 15:3 says, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding good and evil. Where was the first place they saw Yeshua after the resurrection? Luke, and the answer is, let me jump over here because I got this kind of out of order. The answer was in the garden again. Okay, we're going back to Genesis, and I want you to see this. Now we're going back to Genesis. Then they took the body of Jesus and wound it in linen cloth with spices, as the manner of the Jews is to bury it. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden was a new sepulchre, and within was never a man yet laid. And there they laid Jesus. There they laid Jesus. Therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day for the sepulchre, for the sepulchre was nigh at hand, so they've taken him now back to the garden. Now, watch this. Now, upon the first day of the week, that first day of the week in the garden, in the creation story, very early in the boker, okay, very early in the boker is before the sun has risen. They came into the sepulchre bringing spices, which they had prepared, and certain others with them. Mark 16:2. Very early in the boker, in the first day of the week, they come into the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. John 21, the first day of the week, cometh Mary Magdalene early, while it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. You're getting a picture of them coming before the sun was risen, and already Yeshua was not in the grave. Just as he preceded the sun, the moon, and the stars in Genesis 1:14, here in the garden at the sepulchre, he preceded the rising of the sun when they came to the tomb in the boker very early. Boker is a mirror image of Erev in reverse order. Really, I should say Erev is a mirror image of Boker in reverse order. Both are correct because at both ends of it, you have the sun, and then you have a time without any shadows, and then you have a time with long shadows. So it's literally a mirror image of both ends. And it's because it's a pattern. So let's just continue on with what I've got here in the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so let's start again. Ben is between the evenings. Okay, we have the verse in Exodus 12:6. There's a lot of debate over that, and I don't want to focus on the word Erevim this time, Ben ha-Erevim, which literally translates very verbatim and very literally between the evenings. What I want to focus on is the word Ben. And that word means to separate or to distinguish. It is a prime root. The first place we see this word separating and distinguishing is in Genesis 3:15, where enmity separates and distinguishes the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And I will put enmity, ben, between thee and the woman, and ben between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Ben Ha'eravim pointed to the sunset when the lambs were slain. Deuteronomy 16:6 says, but at that place, speaking of Jerusalem, which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at Erev, at the going down of the sun, in the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. So Deuteronomy 16 points to the bin, the location of the division in the evening. It says, and thou shalt roast and eat it in the place where the Lord thy God shall choose, and thou shalt turn in the morning and go into thy tents. Numbers 9:2 also says, let the children of Israel keep the Passover in his appointed season. In the 14th day of this month at Erev, you shall keep it in his appointed season, according to all the rites of it, according to all the ceremonies of it, you shall keep it. And why are we keeping it in the Erev? What is that picture that we've been building? What is that pattern that we're seeing? We're seeing that time that reminds us of Revelation 4, when he's as jasper, when his feet are as burnished brass, I think is how the King James calls it, but that burnt, polished brass. Leviticus 23:5, in the 14th day of the first month at Erev is the Lord's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days must you eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation and do no servile work therein. Okay, the understanding of the structure of this day is going to be so important as we go into the gospel and the story of what happened at the Last Supper, as it's known. You know, it's really interesting. Some of the versions of even King James you can find today note that it's a Passover, but predominantly, I think, a significant amount of the world recognize it as just a supper, the Last Supper he spent with his disciples. But taking this understanding is going to be so important to unwind and unwrap these days, or this time leading up to the point he laid his life down. 3 of the 4 Gospels record Yeshua saying that he will eat the Passover with his disciples. We're going to look at all of these. Mark 14:12. And the first day, protos means in front of the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, where wilt thou we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? And he sent forth 2 disciples and said unto them, go unto the city, and there you shall meet a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him, and wheresoever he shall go in, say unto the good man of the house, the master saith, where is the guest chamber where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished and prepared. There make ready for us. And his disciples went forth and came into the city and found as he had said unto them, and they made ready the Passover. And this is the Hebrew right here. Right here it says, La'achel et ha-Pesach, and he's saying to eat the Passover. It literally says this when we look at it in Hebrew, and it says, Ahol sham et ha-Pesach, and there to eat the Passover, im talmidi, eat with my disciples. Matthew 26:18. And he said, Go into the city to such a man and say unto him, The master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. The same thing here. It says, I'm not going to try to read this to you, but the structure of this word is as in and in his house. We will keep Hag the Passover, Hag Pesach, im Talmudi, with my disciples. And it literally translates out of Hebrew into English, I will come soon, and in your house I will celebrate Passover with my disciples. Luke 22:11. And you shall say unto the good man of the house, The master saith unto thee, Where is the guest chamber, where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished, and there make ready. And again, here it is, to eat there the Passover with my disciples. Who are we to believe? And why are we not believing Yeshua? The Lord's Supper was a Passover meal since Yeshua said it was. This really should be the end of our discussion for every believer about whether or not the Lord's Supper was indeed Pesach. As the sinless Son of Man, there was no leaven of sin within our Messiah. Of course, we know that represents the barley cakes at Pesach. His time of being offered in his human form without any spiritual impurities was at hand. He was the early hastening fruit, the first fruits from the dead, the fields of the world, to sanctify the rest of the harvest. When he rose from the dead, the saints rose. I'm saying all of this is if he was not telling the truth when he said, I shall eat, we will eat, I will eat with my disciples, then very possibly and very logically, we should question whether or not we're waiting for the Messiah to come. If Yeshua said he would, and then he did, that's the end of the story for me. 3 Gospels record him saying he would eat the Passover with his disciples. He will eat the Passover. And we see when they came in on this 14th day, which the whole world does accept that this is the 14th day. And I'm talking about day, I'm talking Erev to Erev. Okay, the 14th at Erev. And now when the Erev was come, he sat down with the 12. That's Matthew 26:20. Mark 14:17. And in the Erev, he came with the 12. Luke 22:14, 6-16. And when the hour was come, he sat down with the 12 apostles with him, and he said unto them, I have desired to eat this Passover with you. This Passover with you. I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say unto you, I will not eat any more thereof. Of what? The Passover, until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Until what is fulfilled? His suffering. He said, I've desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. We're going to look at just a little bit of this. I don't want to, as I told you in the beginning, stop sharing this a little bit here. Okay, unmute yourself because I want some feedback from you guys here, please. I want to know, have I given you enough to chew on and to consider and hopefully to study for this coming week? Is this a good stopping spot? Because there's some more new information in this coming section, and I don't want it I don't want what I've given you to run off. I want you to be able to soak this in. I want you to study it. I want you to look at these verses. I hope you've taken notes, and I want to know, should we, I feel like we should stop here and pick up the next section next week.
Becca, I always believe that. So this is like a reinforcement for me with a lot more added to it through the Hebrew. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I'm good, Becca. I'm driving, so I want to go back home tonight and write down the scriptures and listen to it some more. But
Okay.
yeah, very, very good study.
Okay. Forward, everybody. Does anybody feel like they've got too much information?
No,
No.
it's good.
No, I think it's good.
Okay, Maggie, how are you hanging in there? Have you got too much information? You have to unmute yourself. You're on mute.
No, I think I'm good. I'm a little disappointed in myself. I didn't wait things out properly, but I'm just going to have to go back and do some review and study. But not your fault, my fault.
Look, you would be just shocked how many counting mistakes I have made in my lifetime. It doesn't, to us in the 21st century, this does not feel natural, nor does it feel normal. And it's a huge muscle that doesn't want to develop. And you have to fight that muscle to make it. So I get that.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was definitely a beautiful picture that you painted there. I absolutely loved it. I have a lot to chew on. Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's move forward then a little bit. We're going to go through the SOP. I think I have enough material to go through the SOP. We'll see. So let me go share. Okay. So, well, here's a perfect example. Look at this. This version of the King James calls it a Passover meal. At the Paschal meal, Jesus points out Judas as the betrayer. And we find that in 4 places. And we're going to look a little bit more deeply at the process of being betrayed here. Go on to the next one. Okay, so we're going to go back to the Passover meal, eating the Passover meal. Mark 26:21, and they did eat. Mark 14:18, and as they sat, they did eat. Okay, so I missed my point here. So this is all what these verses are saying right here. And as they sat, they did eat, speaking of the Passover meal, and that's Matthew 26:1. Mark 14, and as they sat, they did eat. So they're eating the Passover meal. I will eat with you. I've longed to eat this Passover. And as they sat, they did eat. Not doubting the words of Yeshua in Mark 14:12 that he would eat the Passover meal with his disciples, we find him reclining at the table and they're eating. Now the SOP. Matthew 26:23. And he answered and said, he that dippeth his hand with me in this dish, the same shall betray me. So there was a dish there. They were dipping a morsel. A sop is a morsel that they were dipping a morsel in. Mark 14:20. And he answered and said unto them, one of the 12 that dippeth with me in the dish. John 13:26. Jesus answered, he it is to whom I give the sop, which is a morsel, when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then Jesus said unto him, that thou doest, do quickly. For no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus said unto him, buy those things that we have need of against the feast. This is a very, very, very important proof text. Are you thinking through the calendar as we read this? The 15th day, the first day of unleavened, is a high holy day. The last day of unleavened is a high holy day. Yeshua would not break the law. Let's go back up to verse 28. Now no man sat at the table knew for what intent he spoke this unto him. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, which is the money, that Yeshua said unto him, buy those things that we have need of against the feast. Also, if it was the 15th day, believe me, Jerusalem would have been closed up, lock, stock, and barrel. There would not have been a place to buy, purchase, sell, barter, anything, or that he should give something to the poor. He then, having received the sop, went out immediately, and it was night. And I believe it was midnight. Part of in the Greek that this could mean would be midnight. So we're going to talk about a stumbling block here, and that's the stumbling block of leavened bread on the Passover table. Can somebody's not muted? Can somebody mute themselves, please? The Lord's Supper was present during the week of unleavened bread, even before the day of Yeshua's passion. Okay, so we're talking about the element of the bread and the wine. We're talking about the element of that sop. Okay, that was present during the week of unleavened bread, even before the day of Yeshua's passion, even before the Lord's Supper, even before this New Testament writing that we're reading about. The lechem, leavened wheat bread, which is the Hebrew, or artos, leavened wheat bread in Greek, can be seen during the week of unleavened in the book of Ruth. And it says, she went and came and gleaned in the fields after the reapers, and her hap was to light on part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was a kindred of Elimelech. And then in 2:14 it says, and Boaz said unto her at mealtime, come thou hither and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers and reached her parched corn and did eat, and she sufficed and left. And I didn't put the verse up here, but Ruth and Naomi come back at the very beginning of the barley harvest. So if the barley is being harvested on the land of Israel, it has to be the week of unleavened, because nobody can harvest anything from the land until the first fruits have been offered. So we see that she's harvesting in Boaz's field. We see that they're eating parched corn, which it's now legal to do because the first fruits have been offered. That would be parched barley. We see that she has artos on the table, and we see that she is also dipping a sop, a morsel, in vinegar. I did not put this verse up here, but on the Passover table at the Exodus, they were to have, the King James says bitter herbs. In Hebrew, it simply says marar. Marar means bitter. Vinegar is bitter. And we're going to see later in the story of Yeshua offering his life that they put a sponge on a reed and he drank vinegar. This is another pattern that I'll hopefully, prayerfully, will be opening up to you as we go along. But for now, we're seeing that there's leavened bread on the Passover table with Yeshua. Okay, open mics. why is it okay to have leavened bread on the Passover table? If you've already
Because
been,
it's wheat.
because it's sweet. So Maggie, why is that significant? You're right. The answer is right. But why is it significant that it's sweet?
Because it symbolizes God, and it's already been blessed from the previous year, and we haven't got to the 50 days yet.
That's right. You're exactly right. All of the law was written about not consuming the first crops until we had given back to Elohim what he had given to us. So if 50 days had not arrived, then we know that the wheat is the first fruits aren't ready. And we know that last year that they gave the first fruits of that crop. So they're eating the old wheat from the previous year, and they're keeping unleavened. They're keeping it. The command is that we keep the week of unleavened, and the unleavened is barley, and that's what we have to keep the leaven out. Modern man has told us by what Big Brother Judah, who doesn't know Yeshua, does, that unleavened bread, the way King James calls it, is the unleavened wheat cracker. We have to get all the things out of our house that can possibly ferment, and all the things out of our house that, whether it's wheat or any grain or any rice, they throw out the rice, they throw out anything that can ferment for that week. But that was not the intention of the law that was written. The intention of the law was written is that we can't eat that crop until we offer the first fruits. And this feast that the Lord had sat down to with his disciples was about the lamb that was less than a year old, and it was about the barley first fruits offering, the week of unleavened bread. And so we know that Yeshua raised on Wave Sheaf Day, which is a Sunday. So what are they eating until that Sunday when they offer the first fruits? Just like the wheat, they're eating from last year's harvest until they can eat the first fruits, eat after the first fruits have been offered.
Right.
There's no biblical, Levitical, Torah reason that a lechem loaf on the table would negate the Lord's Supper, as it's called, from being a Passover meal. Passover and unleavened are about specific elements. Shavuot is about a specific element. Yom Teruah is about a specific element. Yom Kippur is about a specific element, and Sukkot is about a specific element. They're all about a specific first fruits offering. They're all built on offering that in its season. And that's how we know the biblical calendar, is because we have 7 first fruits that are due in 7 different times of the year. So that stumbling block of having artos or lechem on the table with the wine at the eating with the disciples has been something that has hid the truth for many years, because we have not had the understanding, maybe even of the timing on the land out there. But now that we can have that timing, and we can prove it by scripture, and we can prove it by the land, we can separate those 2 feasts and say, okay, yeah, the wheat's not ready yet, so that's bread from the wheat from last year, and they're going, and they're having the Passover meal, and they're having the wine, and they're having the lechem, and it's okay. It wasn't prohibited. Okay, now we're going to look at this a little bit deeper. The Melchizedek, the Melchizedek, is the first one we see presenting the bread and the wine. And I want you to see this pattern. I've always believed that Yeshua was the Melchizedek that Abraham offered to, and that came out and greeted him when he had saved Lot and fought that battle. I always have believed it, but we see a strong pattern. The Melchizedek is the one who came out and presented the bread and wine. Yeshua at the table is the one who presents the bread and the wine. Follow the patterns, they fill in the gaps. It's the same components of lechem and wine that are found at Yeshua's final Passover table. Genesis 14:18. The Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand." And he, Abram, gave him, the Melchizedek, tithe of all. Wheat bread is the remembrance of Yeshua's death. Now, I'm going to throw a lot of you a curveball. I'm going to stop sharing here because I want to see some faces. This is where the water may start running off, okay? I don't want the water to run off. So if we get too deep into new things, tell me, and we'll stop at this. And what I'll do is next week, I'll come back at this point and we'll pick back up at this last point. So if this gets too much new stuff, let me know, okay? Because shockingly, the wheat bread is the remembrance of Yeshua's death. We're sitting there with the disciples and Yeshua at what people have thought of as the Last Supper, which is really a Passover meal. And we're looking at the scene of them eating the Passover meal because he said he would, but the focus, they're not writing about the unleavened bread being there. They're not writing about them eating the lamb. Their focus is on the wheat and the wine, the wheat bread and the wine. It says, and as they were eating, Jesus took the bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it unto them. This is Mark 26. Matthew 26, Mark 14. And as they did eat, Yeshua took the bread, the lechem, the artos, and blessed it and brake it and gave it to them. Luke 22. And he took the cup and gave thanks and said, "Take and divide this among yourselves." And then later on in that section, it says he took the bread. And we're going to see what 1 Corinthians says about the process he was doing. It says, we're going to go to the next slide. "For I have received of the Lord that which I also delivered unto you, that the Lord, the same night in which he was betrayed, the night he was betrayed, the night they've been calling the Lord's Supper, took bread, took artos, and when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, 'Take and eat, this is my body that is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me.' And in the same manner he took the cup, and when he had supped, dined after the Passover, saying, 'This cup is the New Testament, the contract in my blood. This do ye as oft as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as oft as you do eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Lord's death until he comes.'" So it was in the eating and the drinking that we demonstrate the death of Yeshua. It wasn't in the fact that they were sitting at the Passover table. We know he was the unleavened bread on the table during the night of Pesach. We know he was that lamb that was less than a year old that was offered. But those things don't remind us of his death. Corinthians says that as often as we eat the bread, the artos, or lechem, and we drink the wine, we do it in remembrance of him, and we do show the Lord's death till he come. John 6:33 says, for the artos, the bread of God, is he, Yeshua, which cometh down from heaven and giveth light to the world.